Welcome to the NBAV podcast.
Welcome back to NBA Avenue podcast, where I've been looking back at our predictions, and of course, it feels pretty good to essentially predict the NBA Finals before the playoffs, and it's pretty clear that we're probably going to be right. We predicted Boston, and I'm not going to try to make it like we did some incredible prediction by picking Boston, because I'm sure most straightforward, reasonable thinking individuals probably picked Boston as well. But in the Western Conference, there were many teams that you could have picked. Specifically Denver. Probably a lot of people picked Denver to go back there again. And there was a point in the year where I also thought Denver was going to be the team to make it there. And, there are other teams as well. Maybe you were a Minnesota guy. But it's probably mostly people picked Denver. And I had picked Dallas. NBAV's prediction was Dallas versus Boston. And this isn't to say that we were correct on every single series. But looking back at the podcast and the names of all the different episodes that I had, you could see the progression of where we went from the beginning of the year up until now, where there was a point where the rhetoric around, the narrative around the games were kind of, I was going with Boston is the more talented team, and Denver, with Jokic and Murray, are the smarter team. Boston has a deeper roster, Boston has better talent, but Denver has cohesion, and they know how to operate at the end of these close games. But then, once Dallas made the trades around the trade deadline there, and the All-Star break hit, I started talking about Dallas's upside as a dark horse to win the title, and then I don't believe I even called them a dark horse. I said they actually have title capability here. Like, they really do. Dallas could go ahead, and if everything goes right for them from here out, they have a team that's capable of winning the title. Whereas previously, you would have probably just thought, like, hey, Denver's probably got this. I mean, they're the best team in the West. You have Minnesota and Oklahoma City and a couple of teams that are, like, on the rise, and you had the option of Phoenix, who were always there with the triumvirate of stars they had at the top, along with Grayson Allen and what he was giving you from three, right? You could have been persuaded by that, perhaps, to think that they had a chance. Or you could have said, hey, maybe whichever Laker or Golden State team actually ends up making the playoffs, maybe they'll have a chance to upset the balance, considering that you have a couple of young teams near the top in Minnesota and Oklahoma City. Maybe they don't have the legs to actually make a deep playoff run, and maybe you could have gone in that direction. But once Dallas made those trades, I was locked into Dallas really from there. I felt like Dallas, what they did was they got the perfect guys. And there were so many people in the media, so many members of the media, and people who talk about the sport and fans who were not fans of the trades that Dallas made. They didn't like P.J. Washington. They felt like this guy is not a very good defender. They felt like this guy is not a great offensive player. He's not great from three. And he's had off-the-court issues as well. And then they felt like Dallas also, getting the addition of someone from the Washington Wizards in Daniel Gafford, right? They didn't feel like, well, okay, I mean, Gafford's like, he's a big boy, but what's he really going to add to the team? And plus, they gave up a lot to bring in those two guys. There were a lot of people in the league, some very notable commentators and people who talk about the NBA, like Bill Simmons was not a fan of it. And then over time, everybody's hopped onto the bandwagon. I mean, you really can't not hop on. At this point, they're up 3-0 in the Western Conference Finals. But I always loved those moves because I felt like Dallas has one of the things that you can only dream of having, which only a handful of teams in the entire league have, which is you have one of those few players. Maybe there's like 5 or 6 guys in the league who, or maybe 4 guys, maybe 5 guys who, when you have them on your team, they have the ability to win a championship right then and there. Okay, you need to surround them with some other players, but having that one guy means that your roster is not just the sum of the roster, it's the sum of the roster plus an asterisk saying you can really do way more than you think. Because when you have a Luka or a Jokic or a healthy Giannis, some would say, or an SGA, you can go a lot higher than you possibly think. And then you could also have guys in the range of Tatum where, when combined with the right roster, they can also make it. But for the most part, when you have one of these guys, the Luka or the Jokic or the Shea, your ceiling is way higher than what it even appears to be. You can have a great roster, but having one of those guys is the kind of spark plug, the variance in being able to achieve much higher heights than you would have ever thought. And Dallas has that. So when you have that, and you have a guy like Luka who can go out there and in a Game 7 embarrass the opposing team like they did to Phoenix in Game 7 on their home court in a game that you would expect the home team to win, and Luka can just go out there and blow everyone out of the water with an inhumane performance. You don't need to make the craziest trades in order to give you enough to win the title. All you have to do is bring in a couple of athletes who can shoot threes, right? I mean, they already had Derrick Jones Jr. He was already an athletic piece on this team. And you already have a guy who's pretty athletic like Dante Exum who can defend. He doesn't even get to play. He didn't even play in this Minnesota series so far, I don't believe. Has he been on the court? I'm not sure he's been on the court for a minute. Regardless, he's not a part of the action. But bringing in guys like Gafford who can defend and who can get lobs to complement already a guy who can defend and get lobs and Lively. And you have Derrick Jones Jr. who can defend and who can hit threes and get lobs. And the same for PJ Washington. You've just surrounded yourself with an incredible amount of ancillary talent. This is proving to be the model for how to win in today's NBA. There's so many stars and aging stars throughout the league, right? You see Kawhi Leonard. You see Paul George. You see Russell Westbrook. You see Curry, LeBron. Think about how many of these guys are around the league, where it's becoming more important that as these guys are aging, you need other guys to bring that athleticism. You need athleticism from the other positions if these guys are going to be successful. Look at what happened when Golden State won. They brought in Andrew Wiggins, and he was that athleticism piece, along with, of course, they had Draymond Green, and they had Looney, and they had other guys able to complement, and Steph was a drop younger, and Klay was younger, and Klay had a good postseason for the most part, but they brought in that added athleticism as these guys were aging. And Dallas has that athleticism on the roster now. These guys are just going to become increasingly more valuable. Take a look at Minnesota and look at what Jaden McDaniels is able to do, and look at a guy like Naz Reid. These guys have the athleticism to make a big difference. And that's what you kind of need when you have one of the best players in the league, is you need to surround the rest of the team with these 3-and-D pieces where the guys really can bring that next level athlete to the table. And that's what Dallas did. So I loved those trades. I thought it was the perfect trades because you're bringing in guys who have that athleticism. They're not going to have to be the best player on the team. They're not going to have to be the second or third best player on the team either. And you bring them in. You put them with a guy like Luka, a guy like Kyrie, who are already capable of running everything and making their lives much easier. And that was the perfect piece. And then at the point where Kyrie hit the buzzer beater, one of the shots of the year, maybe the best shot of the year, depending on what you think of the Max Strus buzzer beater, which buzzer beater you like more. When Kyrie hit the buzzer beater with his left hand and they won that game in regulation, I felt like there was just a magic about this Dallas team. I feel like they caught lightning in a bottle, and at that point, I said, I think Dallas is going to win is going to make the finals. That's where I said Denver for the whole season. I felt like they were going to get back to the finals again. And now for the first time, I was like, no, I think that there's a magic happening here. I think they bottled something up and they have the lightning and they can make it to the finals. And added on to that is also that Denver got a little bit worse. And this is what I said in the podcasts back then before the playoffs, is that Denver got a little worse. this season without having Bruce Brown and relying a little bit more on other players. Now you think, okay, they got a little bit better because their other players like Michael Porter started playing a little better, and everyone's a year more cohesive, a year more seamless with the talent on the court that you're playing with for another season. But Denver, I would say, got a little bit worse, a little bit more shallow. Whereas you compare it to Dallas, and Dallas has depth for days. And then you also add in that Jamal Murray has had a history where, and I said all this before the playoffs. These aren't my thoughts looking back. This is what I said back then. When I made the prediction, I said that Jamal Murray is a guy who can get injured. He's very injury prone, and they just don't have the depth if he goes out. Whereas Dallas, Kyrie and Luka are probably going to play in all the games. I don't see either of them getting injured, at least not in a way. Like, Luka's been injured, of course. He's been hampered by injury, but he hasn't been affected in a way where he hasn't been able to play. And that was what I thought. I thought Luka and Kyrie would play. And I thought if anyone else got injured, they'd be able to account for it, considering they have a very, very deep team. Very deep. They have Powell, who doesn't even play. They have Kleba, who hasn't really played much now. Not as much as he was in the earlier parts of the playoffs. And that's when I felt like I was going to take Dallas. And then when I eventually made the actual prediction, I did take Dallas. I thought I picked Dallas to win the whole thing, to make it to the finals. And then I haven't really picked that final game. I thought it was going to be Boston versus Dallas. I haven't picked who the winner is, but I'm probably going to go with Dallas. And when I say I'm probably, that is the team that I am going to pick, because I think that Boston is better. Boston's the better roster. They have more talent on the team. But I think that Dallas has the lightning in the bottle. I think it's their year. I think that there's something going on with this team where everything just works. And they have the magic. They have Luka magic and Kyrie, and everything is just going seamlessly for them right now. And I don't think that Boston... it's a very, very tough pick. Picking between Boston and Dallas, because Boston has the better team. And when Boston has Jaylen Brown playing the way he's playing, and Jaylen Brown played well the last time Boston was in the finals, right? Boston was here just a couple of years ago, and they really had a very good shot at beating Golden State. There was a pivotal swing game in there. Was it Game 5? Where there was a game where I think it was 2-2, and Boston nearly took that game to go up 3-2. Ultimately, they lost that one, and it came down to a couple of plays. There was a turning point in that game in the fourth quarter where it was really, really close, and I thought Boston was going to win it for a second and then win the finals. They didn't. But they've been there before. Boston's been to the finals. Jaylen Brown played very, very, very well in that finals. Tatum didn't play as well. So I think it's pretty clear Jaylen Brown's going to play well again in the finals, because he played well in the finals last time. He was the Eastern Conference MVP, whatever the award is called from the Eastern Conference. So he's pretty solid. He's pretty consistent. Jaylen Brown's going to play well. I also think Tatum is going to play better than he did last time. I think Tatum's going to play well too. Derek White is probably going to play well too. He doesn't really ever play poorly. And the same for Drew Holiday. What those guys do, they play a sort of game where they bring it on the defensive end and they hit their threes and they're pretty reliable. Those guys are going to be good. When you add Porzingis into that, it really, really just makes a juggernaut offense. And then we're not even going to touch on Horford and all the other guys that they have. But Dallas doesn't have as good of a team as Boston. But they have Luka. Luka's going to be the best player in the series. And they have Kyrie, who can do things that no one else in the league can really do. Not to mention, if they get to an elimination game, Kyrie's still undefeated in elimination games. So Boston basically has to beat them before they ever get to that scenario. But it's a very, very tough pick. Extremely close. Extremely, extremely close. Now, I know that Dallas still has one more game to win, but we're going on the assumption that Dallas is going to win one of these games. And, of course, it would be better if they won the next one so that they would get a similar amount of rest to what Boston is getting. Boston's already able to rest. So I could totally understand going with Boston. I'm tempted. Parts of me are tempted to pick the more talented team and the team that's been there before. But right now, my feeling is just that Dallas has the lightning in a bottle and they're going to use it. Now, when you talk about greatest of all time conversations. Something that I think gets left out a lot is repeat titles, back-to-back titles, and three-peat titles, back-to-back-to-back, where you can have someone who's one of the greatest players in the sport, and he can win a title and then get knocked out the next season and then win another title, or a few years later win another title, and amass titles like that. But I think one of the hardest things to do in sports, which I think Bill Simmons touches on this, I don't know if he's ever spoken it out quite exactly like I'm about to say it right now, but when you have to go back to back, you show a certain element of what Michael Jordan had, where it's very hard to keep that same motivation. And I think that in that Game 7, when Denver was up against Minnesota and Denver was going for this repeat title, there were guys who really wanted it, but I think that they kind of broke down at the end there. I mean, they did break down. The truth is they did break down at the end. But they were up and they sort of had it, and I think they just took their foot off the gas a little bit, which they never did the previous year. They never even went to a Game 7 the previous year. Last year, they never played a single Game 7 the whole playoffs. This year, they were just a little less sharp. They didn't sweep the Lakers. They won in 5. They had 2 opportunities. They went down big in a series, which they've done in the past a couple years ago, but they didn't do that last year. Last season, they didn't go down big in any series, and then they went down 0-2 to Minnesota. They had 2 opportunities to beat Minnesota, and they didn't take either one. So I think what you're seeing is it takes a certain mentality to win a title, but then it's very hard to keep that mentality just as strong or as strongly in that second season where you're trying to go back-to-back, because you don't have that same hunger because you did win it once. You just won it last year. It's not like it's been that long since you've been an NBA champion. And then sometimes it takes losing that to get that fire lit under you again in a way where you want it that bad. And I don't know if Luka and Kyrie, if they win the title this year, if they're going to come back and win the title again next year, I would probably pick against that. They don't necessarily, this might be a one-year champion, which has been the way it's been for the last several titles. And I think if Dallas were to win, I think it would be the same. Whereas I think if Boston wins, Boston could probably, they would be the heavy favorite to at least be back in the finals next year. Part of that has to do with also playing in the Eastern Conference, but I think Boston just has such an amazing team that it's going to take a Herculean effort for anyone to knock them out of the playoffs. It really took that effort last season. It was a Herculean effort by Jimmy Butler in Miami, but also Boston's even better now, adding Drew Holiday and adding Porzingis. So I don't think that... So just getting back to the point, winning back-to-back titles, mega hard. And Luka has it right now. He has that mentality right now where he's very focused, and I think they're going to keep that all the way through. Where he's just, they win 3 games against Minnesota. He says, "Look, we have one more game to win. We can't take we can't lose sight of the prize. We have to win one more, and we got to take it in the next game." He has that right now, and I think Kyrie has that as well. But there's no saying that they come back next year after winning a championship if they're going to be able to maintain that. And I think that's something that the greatest of all time have. I think that Michael Jordan really exemplifies that, and Bill Russell exemplifies that, and the guys who won back-to-back titles, they really show that. And LeBron did win back-to-back, but for him, he had the best team in the league by far, in my opinion. He could have done the back-to-back-to-back. And that would have shown a different level of focus from him, and different mentality from him, which maybe if he could put his older self back into that youthful body, he would have that now. But in real time, as a younger player, it's very, very rare to have that. And that's one of the things that separates Michael Jordan from the rest of the players, is that he didn't just three-peat once, he three-peated twice. And I think that's something that we're not going to see for a very long time. Someone who does 2 three-peats in their career, that's something we're probably not going to see for decades and decades. And I don't know if Dallas has back-to-back potential, but I think that they're going to be the ones to take it this year as a one-year great championship team. As always, You can follow us on social at NBAV. That's NBA Avenue. We're your source for a great time every time. And until next time, we are out.